The ideas for the exhibition are kind of rooted in a body of research that started with literature. I think one of the key books and texts I was thinking about was Face of the Gods by Robert Farris Thompson, which was looking at altars of the Black Atlantic. And I was thinking about his writing and this idea of connecting spiritual practices and rituals that originate in Africa and the Caribbean and observing how those threads are interpreted across the Atlantic and how rituals and traditions can manifest as aesthetics and kind of looking at the forms of those things, whether that's this idea of assemblage and giving shrines a purpose through building and through repurposing, or whether that's through a kind of rhythmized aesthetic. Very early in the process, I had a conversation with Ben Okri where I was talking about shrines and I shared research with him. When he was talking about shrines, he said they kind of come into being through intentions and through action and through happenings.
If it's too neat, don't trust it.
When I was asked to do shrine, I thought, okay, where do I start? So I thought it should be a shrine where I can put energy in. I guess it represents my engagement with my work. And when I say my work is based on photographs. But really over the years, the photographs are really part of the puzzle. The photographs really are just part of the story. And I think in this context, I look more at it as a storybook. You know, I don't use words, but I would say I'm much closer to words than I am to pictures. I think a lot of what you see are things that come about simply because you start one thing and then you discover another thing and then you think, what about this thing? And I found these seeds. The first time I came to see Grace and came to the gallery, and it was in the summer, and there were these really beautiful seeds hanging from the tree just outside the gallery, and so I picked them, and they dried.
This idea of fabric and cloth is very important, both to me as a designer and also in a kind of spiritual context. In West Africa, cloth has such an important cultural significance, so I think that cloth fabric is also a thread. For me, it's so important to have works by my contemporaries and people that I'm very actively engaged in dialogue with and who shape and form my own practice.
My point of communication comes from abstract painting, so it's really a lot about a very tangible relationship to color and texture, points of familiarity having to do with pattern and material surfaces, but those things presented in a kind of less knowable way. So I would want the viewers to have a kind of curiosity about what they're looking at and be kind of transformed by the juxtapositions. I mean, I've always been really impressed by Grace's work, and like we were in a show together at the Camden Arts Center curated by the fashion designer Duro Alowu. I just saw her at the opening and just approached her, and I was just like, I'm stunned by the work that you've made in the past few years. She had just finished her studies at St. Martin's and she won the LVMH prize, so there was a lot around her already. But to be in that context of an artist community, I felt like it was important for me to like kind of acknowledge the fact that I was so aware of like her accomplishments and her focus, as it were, to her craft of fashion. It's something that continues to inspire me.
I feel like Eric's work has a real sensuality, which is also reflected in the work of Rotimi Fani-Kayode. For me, his work's very important because he incorporates his own Yoruba spirituality with his homoerotic desires and his sexuality.
So what's shown here are 4 iterations of Flowers for Africa. So you have Flowers for Africa Uganda, which is a large wall piece with tassels coming off of that, and that comes from an archival image taken from a really official ceremony in a big stadium when Uganda celebrated its independence. There's another bouquet which has a pink ribbon on it, which is placed on a pedestal, which which is called Flowers for Africa Nigeria, and that was a floral arrangement that was handed to the Queen's representative when she came to do the official visits at the moment of independence. There's a small bowl in which there's a kind of a ball of small delicate flowers, and that represents Flowers for Africa Mozambique, and that was placed on a negotiation table during negotiations between the Frelimo, which is the Liberation Army, and the Portuguese government. And then the final pedestal, which is a very slight arrangement, a boutonniere, which is Flowers for Africa Tunisia, and that was a floral kind of a boutonniere was placed on the lapel of the president when he was doing a speech in front of his people during the independence ceremonies.
Three things I've been thinking about also moving through the space, which is this idea of connecting through mind, body and spirit. So the kind of ideas of magic and magical realism are starting to kind of become integrated into this space through the works of David Hammonds, which is a real honour to be able to include his works in the show. I think it's very important to kind of have no hierarchies between artists, so allowing the writers, musicians, artists to kind of all have their own space and voice.
Well, this lovely shrine was put together by Grace and her crew based on my affinity for sun colors and orange. Grace seems to know a little bit about my affinity for orange before we even talked. She seems like she's aware of my music for many years. So when I came to Serpentine a few days ago to start working on the shrine, I saw the shrine was already built. It was most gorgeous. I feel like, I don't know if I could call it a womb, but I'm being cradled by a very soft energy, nature energy. I like parks. I live in New York City, and Central Park is one of my favorite parks. But New Hyde Park has got class, yeah. And there's a river there, and there are geese. The sensation is I'm more in nature than I am in concrete.
This exhibition's weaved together through dialogue with different collaborators, and I think I was always interested in a multiplicity of perspectives and voices. I never want to show a kind of singular vision or a fixed notion. It's always about something that's more fluid, it's more shifting, and that comes about through kind of collaboration and interaction with other artists. It would be wonderful if people can kind of take from this exhibition that it's a community space for reflection and meditation and thinking.